Shadow here, Shadow shoot shot, Shadow, Mr. Storm, and we're getting into it this week, man. We're talking about cheap pops in the industry, cheap pops in the wrestling industry. What are cheap pops? What do they mean? What are we talking about when we say cheap pops? What is a good pop? What is a bad pop? What is something that just basically drops off? That's what we're talking about right here on the Shadow Nose Network. This is the Shadow Shoot Shot. Just make sure that you like and subscribe each and every time you tune into the show and support the Shadow Nose Network. Yeah. So let's get right into it, man.
All right.
Um, Cheap pops is a term that's used lightly, and I think that there's a lot of people in the audience that may or may not know or understand what a cheap pop is.
Yeah.
People usually just they hear the term pop. Oh, that was a big pop. Oh,
Exactly.
wow. Yeah, basically, a pop is when there's a moment in wrestling where everybody just goes crazy. You get a big response
Okay.
from the crowd. People are on their feet. They're yelling, they're screaming, they're cheering, or whatever. Cheap pop is also chants. Chants there now. I can kind of put it in the instance of there's good pops and there's bad pops, and then
Okay.
there's cheap pops. So, for instance, Seth Rollins, his music hits. People come
Yeah.
out, everybody chants, oh, that is considered a pop, but it's actually a cheap pop because basically Shinsuke Nakamura kind of had that in his thing, and then
Uh-huh.
Seth Rollins added that to his thing, and then fans started doing it. So that is considered a cheap pop by Seth Rollins because he kind of tagged on to someone else's gimmick and he made it his own. It got
Okay.
more popular, but he made it his own. Now, here's another one where it's like the chance of CM Punk,
Yeah.
CM Punk. People go crazy. They've been chanting for CM Punk for years and years when he left the WWE. Then he
hmm
returned to the WWE, and people are still chanting. There's a lot of people that are like big fans of CM Punk, like the Tech Master himself. And
Exactly.
I beg to defer when it comes to this guy in particular. And in his latter age in wrestling, and he still considered himself the best in the world, where if you ask me, I would not agree with that statement. And taking a look at this past Monday, which he kind of confirms each and every time he gets into the ring with Drew McIntyre. This is a guy that's kind of had CM Punk's number since he came back, since they put him in the program. And I'll tell you what a cheap pop that CM Punk's gets. He gets the fans to chant for him. Now, when guys are cutting promos, and you
hmm
got Drew McIntyre. He's cutting his promo. He says what he
hmm
has to say. Seth Rollins, he cuts his promo. He goes off on CM Punk. He tells him to shut up. He says, "Get in the ring. This is my ring. You do what I say." Cool, fantastic. Seth Rollins called his Punk card. Punk came back into the ring. Now here's the thing. CM Punk stood there with a microphone at one moment, down by his side. Because in actuality, if you really think about it and you take a
hmm
look at that video this Monday Night Raw and you see, pay close attention, he was trying to gather his thoughts. He was thinking of what to say next. This is off script moment. This is a moment where CM Punk has been so good at retaliating, having a comeback each and every time. But in the last couple of weeks, I've noticed that CM Punk always veers back to the crowd. He says to Drew McIntyre, "You're doing this, you're doing that, you're doing all these different things, but you're dumb. The one thing you don't have is crowds chanting your name." Then he looks to the crowd. He holds the microphone up. That's a cheap pop.
Okay.
Crowd starts chanting, "CM Punk, CM Punk." But the problem I'm having with that is that you're the best in the world. You're the pipe bomber. And Drew McIntyre dropped the pipe bomb on you. Seth Rollins dropped the pipe bomb on you. And all you could do in response was get the crowd to chant your name. So it seems like when he's running out of things to say, or he could not catch a moment where he had something to say, he goes back to the crowd and gets the crowd to start chanting his name. But the interesting thing throughout this thing was the chants were real low. They weren't like epic and big and pull until he raised the mic and he asked the crowd to please chant my name. that's considered a cheap pop. That's considered a cheap thrill. That is just considered like getting the crowd heat. But that's not. You can call it good heat because it's for him. But in overall, that's a cheap pop. And
Well,
CM
here's the
Punk
thing.
is just not that great anymore.
Here's the
Yeah.
thing with CM Punk though, and you can see it as written on his face. I don't think he no longer has a love for wrestling. I think it's monetarial for wrestling. I think that was the thing. I think he tried to go into acting that didn't, skyrocket in a certain way. He had some good roles, but it wasn't anything that kind of like put him completely over. I think he came back to wrestling as a necessity. And when you look at that necessity, maybe it's just, he's not as quick as because when you looked at him when he was his first stint in the WWE, he was on. I think he had a little bit of that love, and then I think towards the end he lost it, and then he went to AEW because that was his only really avenue to get back into wrestling. And now he's at a point where maybe he's just over it because you can look at him and just tell that same energy's not there that it is. He's a little older now. He's been hurt multiple times. It doesn't feel like it's the same energy that we saw from him.
I could agree with that, and I think that it does stem from the injuries. I think that he's
Mm-hmm.
at a point in life where it's like, how many more of these
Mm-hmm.
injuries do I have to recover from to get back into the
Exactly.
ring? How many more times can I keep doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And you could kind of see that. And look, he looks jacked. He looks super jacked right now.
Oh
He
yeah.
looks better than he did in the AEW. He's got the broad shoulders, he got the big arms and everything. So it looks like he's ready for this match at
Mm-hmm.
SummerSlam against Drew McIntyre. But yeah, overall, I'll repeat what I've been saying since he came back to WWE, and that is he's a specialties match. He is
Mm-hmm.
not your world champion. He is not a champion. Maybe do a run with a tag team championship to build towards a feud with somebody. But in overall, I really feel like this Drew McIntyre match is a specialty match. This is a build-up match. This is a match they built up for months. This is what you do with CM Punk. With Seth Rollins, I think if he's going to face Seth Rollins, it should be a build-up match as well. I think
Mm-hmm.
just honestly, if you ask my opinion, yeah, this should lead towards Survivor Series and
Mm-hmm.
something with Drew McIntyre, Seth Rollins, CM Punk, and who's the captains, and they building a big Survivor Series match
Mm-hmm.
leading towards Royal Rumble. Seth Rollins maybe screwing CM Punk or CM Punk screwing Seth Rollins. And then you have Seth Rollins versus CM Punk at WrestleMania. Not for a title, but for it all. Maybe loser leaves WWE, whatever you want to
Mm-hmm.
categorize that is. But I think that that's what you build for a good pop. That would be something that the fans could appreciate and really pop for. But if you start putting CM Punk and building them towards a world title match, I would
Mm-hmm.
say you're making a huge mistake. I think Drew McIntyre has said it, and he said it, I think, again this past Monday on Raw, that it is like you come in here, you wanted to take over things, your time is over with. And I
Yeah.
really do believe that a guy that's at 50 or near 50, he should
Yeah.
just
Mm-hmm.
be a specialties match. But that's the thoughts on that and CM Punk, my feelings on him and stuff. And here's another example because I kind of gauge a wrestler. And CM Punk is a fantastic wrestler.
Oh
Don't get
yeah.
me wrong.
Yeah.
But now we talk about MJF and AEW. This
Mm-hmm.
is a guy that really garners and pulls and feeds on the crowd. And this is a guy that loves cheap pops. Now, you can say something derogatory towards the fans in the state that you're in or the city that you're in, and you can
Mm-hmm.
get a pop. You can get it, and that's
Yeah.
what they call Mick Foley would call it a cheap pop. Like he say, hey, what WWE, welcome to Monday Round. I'm here in Cincinnati, and then they pop. That's a cheap pop. That's what it is because you're acknowledging that
Exactly.
city or whatever place that you're in. But I think that there's negatives to it as well, but there's still positives. Um, what's his name? I mention him a lot, but Rey Mysterio Jr.
Mm-hmm.
This kid, he gets good pops. He gets healed. They what they call it heat. He gets good heat because it's positive heat. Because it's not because people don't like you, but it's because people love to hate you, and that's the
Yeah.
difference
Mm-hmm.
with
True.
him. And then you talk about someone like Karrion Cross. People just don't like you, dude. You can't wrestle. You're a terrible wrestler. You got the look. You can talk well, but when the bell rings, you can't wrestle for crap. And there is no cheap pop for him because this guy gets no pop. This guy is just terrible. I don't know what it is. Either you got it or you don't have
Yeah.
it, and that's just the simplicity of it. Now, here's another cheap pop, but which is a good pop, which is Jey Uso. Jey Uso. You know, he did that thing when they was out in the UK or overseas in Europe, and he did the thing, and they did it with the lights. Oh wow, bang, boom, boom, pow. This guy just like his entrance, everybody loves it. They adore it. It's fantastic. It's great. Now you have to deliver in the ring because he's been a
Yeah.
tag team wrestler for so many years. The question is, can he continue? Can he evolve and grow as a singles wrestler? The match he had with Carlito was flat. Carlito is a flat wrestler. He's a slow paced wrestler. He's an old school wrestler. I mentioned that a lot about MJF, but Carlito's been around for decades. He was learned. He's a second generation wrestler. He's a slow paced wrestler. But you want to get the best example of a cheap pop, which is a good pop, and that is Ron Simmons. Ron Simmons said one word, and everybody waited
Okay.
for it. He starts speaking. You give chant, people doing things around him. He looking around. He looks. He just pauses for a second, and then he just looks at the camera and says, "Damn!" People go crazy for it. Why? Because he set it up. He built it. He established it, and that's the difference between good pops and cheap pops. Because you can go for the easy pops and the cheap pops, but like when you build something, you building your brand, you establishing your character, you build towards something that really matters. People care about you, and that's what's the difference between big names like The Rock, like Stone Cold, like Roman Reigns. Acknowledge me. You know, you get the pops for that. Why? Because you built it, and it took Roman Reigns a while to get people to really acknowledge the acknowledge me line. It didn't just happen overnight. I mean, he spent months and months on SmackDown saying it every week, and people booed him. People hated it. People didn't like it. But then he kept delivering in the ring each and every time, and he kept winning to a point when he said, "Acknowledge me," he got a huge pop for it. And that's the difference. You know, you can name several wrestlers that can do it and have done it. And here's an example. This guy right here, Diamond Dallas Page, go back to the WCW days. This is a guy that started wrestling in the ring. He was a manager for years, wrestled in the ring in his 40s. And this is a guy that called himself first the People's Champion. And this is a guy that ran into the audience in the crowd and did that diamond cutter sign and said, "Feel the bang." People went crazy for it. He always got great pops for it. Why? Because he built towards it. He earned it. He delivered in the ring. He did his thing. There's things that you have to work for and earn in order to get the spot that you're in. And you have to be able to deliver and win over the fans. When you go for cheap pops and they're not over with the fans, that means you haven't earned it. When you earn it, the crowd will respond in a positive way. And that's
Well,
the simplicity of it.
there's a lot of ways too, though. I think a lot of wrestlers fall into that trap, and I think it's a lot of younger wrestlers that I've seen that are falling into that trap, but just trying to. I think it's because now, there's a difference when Diamond was doing it and he was doing it great. It wasn't
Mhm.
a social media era.
Right.
It
True.
was you
True.
were on TV, the ratings, everything was different. I think now it's like there's so much pressure on a younger performer coming in, and especially because he's got to have his social media numbers up. There's way too many elements. It's just not about wrestling now because there's opportunity outside. Let's be honest. I don't think that Mercedes would have gotten her rise if she wasn't well on social media. That led her to
Yeah.
the Mandalorian. That led her
Mhm.
to leaving the WWE and then also securing a very large contract is because she is in so many platforms. Well, I think when you look at some of these younger wrestlers, they don't have time to build it anymore. They've got to be that person that are getting those likes on any of the social media platforms, and they've got to start moving in different directions. I think that's why you're seeing so many of them running with the cheap pops.
Yeah, and that's a key. Social media is one, but it does go. It goes to. It's like the time that you are allowed in the ring,
Hmm.
you have to deliver, and you have to push and work hard to get people to acknowledge you or recognize you or take you to that next level. There's very few far in between that been able to do that, but then there's also those elements and moments and stuff to where it's like the promotions itself. You got to be
Hmm.
good backstage. People got to like you backstage.
Yeah.
People got to be a person that someone wants to hang out with, someone that wants to work with you in the ring. Those are the key elements in order to get to that next level in the ring as well and stuff, because there's guys that people say, I don't want to work with him. I'll never work with that guy. That guy's terrible, or that guy is dangerous. There's
Hmm.
plenty of people in AEW that want to come to WWE, but when you look at their ring work, you say, he's too dangerous. I don't know about that. And look, not just knocking AEW, WWE, they're allowing guys in NXT to do some very dangerous things, and I think that they need to once again reel them back in, because WWE had rules. They eliminated a lot of moves, but a lot of guys are just trying it out now, and so you have to be careful. And that's the other element of that is that coming into a promotion, because
Hmm.
you go back to WCW, as we talked about DDP and WCW, it
Yeah.
is WCW. They lived for the cheap pops, because it was every week came to like, what's the surprise for this week? What's the shock value for this week? AEW does the shock value with the violence and the blood and everything else like that, which I saw a clip or something and they said it was traumatizing kids. The next generation of wrestling fans that watch
Hmm.
AEW will be traumatized wrestling fans, and that's a real big negative for AEW. But going back to WCW, it really came down to, it's like you had Scott Hall, Kevin Nash come in. Then
Hmm.
every week it was like, who's coming in next? Who left WWE? Who came in? Just to get that cheap pop for ratings or whatever it is, or a reaction from the fans. But then the problem with WCW and the problem with things now is things drop off after that.
Exactly.
AEW, for
Yeah.
example, as you said, Mercedes Moné, she came in, CEO, and all that kind of stuff. And she came in, she won her title and everything else like that. But guess what? No one's popping for you, honey. No one's going crazy for you anymore. And the question is why? You talk too much. You need to shut up. You need to just work in the ring. You need to have minimal conversations on the microphone. It's easy to sell a mic in 60 seconds. You can
Yeah.
sell a very good match in 2 minutes. Ask a lot of wrestlers that can do it. You can sell matches in 60 seconds. They used to only allow you a minute to talk.
Yeah.
You got to be able to do that. And I think that the biggest problem with Mercedes Moné is she runs her mouth way too much. And that's where she's losing the thrill, the cheap pop, and that whole dancing gimmick. It's not working. It's not lasting as long as it's lasted for Swerve Strickland. He's the champion. In actuality, that's he's been faded. So Swerve
Hmm.
delivers in the ring. Swerve does his thing. That's why he's still champion. Now the only thing is whether or not the powers that be backstage can manage to line up the guys that the fans would appeal to in a match, and that you can continue to go on as champion or whatever your position is. Those are the key elements. It's like you can't just live for cheap pops. You
Hmm.
have to live for your ring work, your mic work, and your likability in the ring and backstage. And those are
Well,
the similar key
well,
elements in order to last.
what do you think it is too, though? Do you think it's just like, I know we touched on this before, especially about the love of wrestling, but like in your mind too, do you just think that because of the extracurricular things of social media and other scenarios that they're just not putting in the time into like the practice part of being in the ring? You know, it's like, because there's some people that I know that probably live and die in that ring, and then
Yeah,
there's
it is.
some that find ways not to get into it as much, you know?
Yeah, it is. It is that. I mean, like you look at guys, the bodies of guys in the AEW. You say, okay, bro, you're on live TV. Get in the gym, look like a superstar. There are
Mhm,
guys that work and live for in the wrestling, that breathe, that study
mhm,
tapes. Like you could say, just based on what I saw this week with MJF, that he's a student of wrestling because he is watching a lot of moves, but it
mhm,
has to also make sense when you do it. Like you can be a smart guy, good on the mic, and then you start paying homage on some level of using guys' moves. but the real students of wrestling would
Yeah.
take that move to the next level. And that's the key. Here's an element of something that like a lot of people they never say that I can never claim the fame to it, but it is the mid rope jump. The mid rope jump was established or created by yours truly.
Okay.
Run to the middle rope, jump to the middle rope. I gave a back elbow. And that was back in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. I did that. Guys started taking that and adding that to the repertoire. Guys then went working house shows or working TV squash matches as jobbers, and they took that into the ring. And then you saw guys continue to repeat it and
Mm-hmm.
copy it and do other things. Chris Jericho, for instance, is a guy that mastered the middle rope moves. And it is the element of it's like it started with me with the jump to the middle rope, spring off, boom, hit you with an elbow. Then it went from Chris Jericho to jumping and doing a lion salt and doing a lot of different other things. And of course, Rey Mysterio, so forth and
Exactly.
so on. And then generations later, decades later, guys are doing tremendous things. So you have to be a student of the game. So I'm saying for guys like a MJF, where you're now copying all these different wrestlers' moves, and Tony Schiavone is mentioning it. That's great and fantastic, but can you take it to the next level? That's the only question. That's when you know someone is a student of the game. It's like LeBron James. This guy eats, drinks, and breathes basketball. He
Yeah.
spends millions of dollars on his body. That's why this guy is going into the NBA 21st season at the age of 39 because he is a student of the game. Kobe mentality. I'm hearing like Mamba mentality is now like I hear it in tennis. I've
Yeah.
been listening to people talk about it in the Olympics, and it's the phrase that 5, 10 years from now, it will be about who has the Mamba mentality, not just in the NBA, but in wrestling and basketball and football and baseball and any and all sports, because that's the legendary history of a Kobe Bryant that took
Mm-hmm.
you to that next level, that took himself to that next level, and everybody wants to be like Kobe.
Well,
So
I think also one thing that we're kind of like glancing over as well is that, for LeBron to spend that amount of money in the situation, LeBron is compensated for that amount of money.
absolutely.
You got where we're hearing Mercedes Moné making $5 million, and she's like, it's the biggest payday of my career. And I wonder if those paydays were bigger and the motivation was there, because let's be honest, as much as we love Kobe Bryant, the Mamba mentality was two things. It was mind, body, and money.
Yeah,
There's a
true
point
that, true that.
that money compensates you. So I think if maybe some of these, maybe that wrestling, that desire to stay on top and everything. Look, we're talking about CM Punk and his lack in his face looking like it. How much money do you think CM Punk's making for his body to be damaged? And then, like, how many years left is his body going to recover? Well, the same thing. Now, there's a difference. Your body can recover if you're making $20 million a year. That you might want to push
Yeah.
yourself to the next level for that. So do you think that if there was better compensation, because while, you and I would love $5 million a year, if you're going on the road, you're putting your body through all this stuff, $5 million a year is not really that
Well,
much when it comes down,
now,
especially after you pay taxes.
well, I will say this: like I give props to Tony Khan for paying these guys so well,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
because if you look at the salaries of some of the WWE stars that are names, they're not even in the seven figures. Some of
Yeah.
these guys are not even making seven figures, and they're big stars. And then yeah, it kind of you get compensated for merchandise and stuff like that, which is fantastic. But and yeah, we could talk about we have to do an episode on just
Compensation.
pay and
Yeah.
unionizing. Jesse the Body
Mhm.
Ventura trying to unionize wrestling. We can go into that whole thing,
Yeah.
but I will say this: when I got into the business and I was training to be a wrestler with Mondo, I had a fear. It was like you had to take a bump, then you go to the first rope of the turnbuckle, take a bump off of there, go to the second rope, take a bump off of there, go to the top rope, take a big bump off of there, and I had a phobia, fear of that when I first started. And how, and it was having the mentality of it was like, I have to defeat that fear. I have to take good bumps off of there. One, so I don't get hurt, and two, so I look good. So I used to go to the beach. I would run I would do calisthenics at the beach, and then I would go to like the fence, the rail, the fence at the beach, and I would stand on top of the fence, and I would take a bump off of the fence onto the sand, and then I would go to the lifeguard pier. The lifeguard pier. I would go up to the lifeguard pier, and to the point where I got to the point where on the rail at the lifeguard pier, I took a jump right off of that lifeguard stand, and boom, took a bump onto the sand. Once I did that, and I was not afraid to do that. Oh, sky was the limit. I was able to do a lot of things, but I kept trying to get better. And that's the only thing where, when it comes to guys that are in the business right now, guys that are on TV, it's like you got to put the work in order to be better, And if you're not evolving in the next couple of years, then it's like what's his name? Is his name Omos? Yeah, Omos. 7 foot tall, big African giant. Oh my God. He never got better. Where is he now? Disappeared. I don't even know if he's still with WWE. He might still be on the roster. But you look at guys like that, and then here's one last guy. Jinder Mahal. Fantastic. This guy, he did a long stint in WWE, left, came back, became champion. He changed his whole look. This guy just looked like a regular Joe to having the most cut body, and he became champion. Same thing with Drew McIntyre when he returned. He was just a big, stocky guy. Now he's a cut-up guy. But Jinder Mahal, I think that here's the one more run in him. I think that if AEW came in, that's a cheap pop. But that's a good cheap pop because his appearance in AEW could help set a new standard for AEW. And they're not utilizing the guys and the names that they already have. Miro, there's a lot of guys that are on their roster, but not on television. You have star caliber, star quality. You just got to put them on television and put them into feuds. So, just overall, I think there's a lot of opportunities for both WWE and AEW to do. I think that for a superstar or wrestlers that I'm speaking to right now, the key is that to perfect your craft, get better at your craft, stand in front of the mirror, cutting promos. Do it until you can cut the most perfect 60-second promo. Then after you've done that, do a 2-minute promo. Cut a 2-minute promo. When you can cut a 2-minute promo, you can get there in front of TV and cut promos on anybody at any point, at any time. When you're good, when you perfect it, your first good one. And most of the time it is just like repeating the same one and then getting really good at it till you memorized it and then using pieces of it depending on who you're feuding with and what the subject is. That's the key to it. And it's your character, your persona. So, So
it's all the fundamentals, basically. Yeah. Learn your fundamentals, work hard for them, and then it will still show progress. So if you're a bottom tier guy on a promotion, just if you keep your nose down, learn your fundamentals and everything, you've got that opportunity to rise in it because they'll see your work ethic, what you're pretty much telling me, right?
Best last example is guys that lose every week. There's one guy that will go down in history that didn't care. He was so great. He was fantastic.
I think I know this guy.
He was jobbing every week, and he would take the biggest bump, and he would just look up into the lights, and then to a point where the fans started cheering him when he lost. That is Razor Ramon, Scott Hall. Scott Hall, when he was being punished for the click thing and they did and everything, Vince McMahon jobbed Scott Hall for like about 2 or 3 months. Every week he would have big matches, and every match he would lose. And then to a point where it's like people knew Scott Hall, oh, here comes Scott Hall. He's facing this guy. He's gonna lose. But guess what? To a point where he just took it. And he took it like a pro, jobbing every week. To a point where the fans started cheering him. And that's when he just organically got over. And that's when eventually he went to WCW and was big there. Those are the key elements. Sometimes you're just like a jobber. Be the best jobber. And then guess what? The fans may just turn and to love you. And then you'll get over to a point where the bookers and everybody else backstage will say, oh, wait a minute, we might have to put him over now. And then things change. So
True. Let me ask you something now. When it comes to that, do you think that there is a happy medium if you're only like a mid-carder? if you can never reach the top, do you think that there is a way to be fundamentally happy just doing that for the rest of your career? Because there's guys like, like you said, Scott Hall, which rose and jumped above that. But then I'm thinking of guys like the Brooklyn Brawler, who, basically
Yeah.
was where they were and what the situation is.
Well, he was an opening gag. Yeah,
True, but he did that to the best of his perfection. I
That's
would give him
jobber.
credit for that.
Yeah,
But
Brooklyn
now,
Ball.
how do is there a way to be happy with a career like that, just being in the middle and never
Yes.
being in the top?
Yes,
Okay.
there are guys that get to a point in their career where it's done. Where it is you are where you are. Like for me, I knew at one point I was like, this is it. I'm not going any further. I won't take steroids. I won't do this. I won't do that. I won't sacrifice my body or my life or my morals for big promoters. So I got out. Now I talk about it, but guys like Brooklyn Brawler, he knew where his peak was, and he peaked. And guess what? He'll go down in history as one of the best jobbers in the industry. And that's just the key part about it. It's like, these are guys that help put over the young talent.
Yes.
These are guys that you go to in the backstage and you ask for advice, what to do, what should I do to do better, to be better after you have a match with them, or if you never have a match with them. Those are the guys that you go to. Those are the go-to guys, because guess what? Those are the journeymen. They're always going to be around. They're always going to job. And then guess what? Those are also guys that end up being management in the backstage. Booker, road agents, and everything else like that. So that's the key of like understanding that and knowing that and being able to roll with that. But you got guys like Coco Beware. He was a Mick Carter. He never made it to the big match and stuff. But then you got other guys that really actually became something more, like Ron Simmons. Ron Simmons was a Mick Carter. They refused all the bookers. And you're talking about in the 80s, and there was never going to be a black world heavyweight champion. Ron Simmons was good at what he did. Ron Simmons bust his butt to get where he's at. Ron Simmons and Tony Atlas, and man, these guys worked hard to become tag team champions. Ron Simmons paid his dues, and when that moment came and they called his number, he was ready. And that's what it means. It's like you got to just be ready. Because you never know. Booker T, who ever thought that Booker T would become world champion as well? They called his number, and he answered. So it's just being there and be present in the moment, and continue to learn and grow, and always be humble. I think that those are the key elements and stuff. I try to be humble as much as possible and stuff. Sometimes I'm not. But it is what it is.
Well, I think we should just do a segment, like, maybe for one of the podcasts where we start doing the Shadow Hall of Fame, and we'll put like, the high Carters on, and then we'll put the guys that probably, were good, that probably will never be in the WWE's Hall of Famers because they were on the bottom of the tier, but we'll start a tier for them where we put the mid Carters in. We'll give them a Hall of Fame kind of for the Shadow Shoot Shot Hall of Fame. We should do that.
We should definitely do that, because he may never become world champion, but he did get rewarded. Sami Zayn. I think that WrestleMania really showed rewarding the older stars. Sami Zayn, what's her name? The women's champion. I can't remember her name, but they've rewarded a lot of people in the WWE, and there's a rare
like R-Truth.
R-Truth, that's right. R-Truth and the Miz. These are journeymen now. These are guys, where it's like, they'll never be, and it's like they got their rewards. Stay hard, stay true. But we definitely should do that and stuff. Main event, mid carders, and everything. And honestly, people would be happy if I said that Jey Uso, main event Jey Uso should be mid carder Jey Uso. I don't see him winning a world title, but we'll see. You may be.
Well, he does have a family member on the top of the board. I wouldn't bet against it.
No, the big feud's
bet against it.
But as a solo world champion, I don't see it. But
like I said, you got family on the board, brother. You never know.
You never know. But coming weeks and coming shows, we're gonna review Comic-Con definitely for sure and stuff. We're gonna give our takes on action figures, new action figures coming out. We're gonna give our take on AEW's appearance at Comic-Con. And let me say this, and I remind everyone on that show. We were the first to bring wrestling to Comic Con. And we'll repeat that story so everyone knows. So until then, man, it's been fun. Tune in to Pixel Plastic and Inks. Oh, and make sure everyone tunes into all the special shows that we've got coming up. Toybox Chronicles got a lot of cool things coming up, and a lot of cool shows opening up. So everybody just keep tuning in, like and subscribe to the Shadow Nose Network, Shadow Shoe Shop, Pixel Plastic and Ink, Toybox Chronicles, all the great stuff that we got going on. Thank you for your support. We appreciate it. Until next time, tune in if you got the guts.